Hello, my name is Ben Harper. I'm 23, living in a small rented apartment on the south side of Seattle, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the radiator groans like it's got a grudge. I share it with a buddy from high school who works nights at a warehouse, so we mostly just pass each other like ships in the dark. I drive an old pickup truck that coughs every time I start it, and I work as a road crew laborer, the kind of job that leaves your hands calloused and your boots caked in dust. It's not glamorous, but it pays the rent, keeps gas in the tank, and leaves me too tired to think about much else. My days are simple. Wake up before dawn, pull on a flannel and jeans, grab a thermos of coffee, and head to whatever stretch of asphalt needs fixing. I never thought my life would be anything more than that. That morning was no different. The sky was a heavy gray, the kind that promises rain but holds off just to mess with you. A thin fog clung to the road we were working on, somewhere in the suburbs south of the city, where strip malls and quiet neighborhoods blur together. The air was cold, biting at my knuckles as I gripped a shovel, scooping hot asphalt from a pile and spreading it across a cracked stretch of pavement. My back ached, my breath fogged in front of me, and the steady thump of my boots against the ground was the only rhythm keeping me going. The other guys on the crew were scattered around, some tamping down gravel, others hauling wheelbarrows, all of us moving like parts of a tired machine. Then I heard tires crunching on the shoulder. A black SUV pulled up, sleek and out of place, against the battered cones and warning signs. I didn't look up at first, too focused on keeping the asphalt even. A door opened, then shut with a solid thud. Footsteps approached, quick but deliberate, the kind that belong to someone who knows where they're going. I kept shoveling, figuring it was just another city inspector here to complain about permits or timelines. "Excuse me," a voice cut through the morning chill, sharp but not harsh. "That layer of asphalt, if it's off by even a few centimeters, it'll peel up by tomorrow." I stopped mid-scoop and looked up. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, a gray windbreaker zipped up against the cold. Her dark hair was pulled into a high ponytail, a few strands loose from the wind, and a name tag hung loosely around her neck, swaying slightly. Eleanor Vance, 42, though I wouldn't have guessed it then. She had the kind of face that didn't need makeup to stand out. Sharp cheekbones, eyes that seemed to see right through you, and a posture that said she was used to being listened to. She wasn't yelling, wasn't condescending, but her words landed like she'd been watching my every move. I blinked, a little thrown. Most supervisors don't bother with guys like me, the ones at the bottom of the chain, shoveling and sweating. Yeah, I said, wiping my forehead with the back of my glove, leaving a streak of dust. "I'll fix it." She nodded, her gaze lingering for a second longer than it needed to. Then, almost like she hadn't meant to say it, she added, "Sorry, I didn't mean to snap. It's just, I don't have anyone else to yell at today." The words hung there, half a joke, half something else. Her voice softened at the end, like she'd let something slip she hadn't planned to. I looked at her again, really looked this time. Beneath the crisp professionalism, there was something else. Something tired, maybe even lonely. Her eyes flicked away like she'd caught herself, and she turned to walk back to the SUV. I don't know why, but I spoke before she could leave. "It's all good," I said, leaning on my shovel. "I've had worse bosses." It wasn't much, but it got a small smile out of her, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes but feels real anyway. She paused, one hand on the car door. "Good to know," she said, then got in and drove off, the SUV disappearing into the fog. I stood there, watching the taillights fade, the shovel still in my hands. The other guys didn't notice, too busy with their own work, but I felt something shift, like a crack in the pavement I'd been standing on my whole life. That sentence of hers, about not having anyone to yell at, kept echoing in my head. It wasn't just about the job. It was about her, about a weight she carried that nobody else saw. I went back to shoveling, the asphalt steaming in the cold air, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I'd been invisible my whole life, just another guy on the crew, but for one moment, I'd seen her. And somehow, I knew she'd seen me too. Now let's dive into the story. A few days had passed since that foggy morning on the road, but her words kept replaying in my mind like a scratched record. Work hadn't changed much. Still the same grind of shoveling asphalt, patching cracks, and dodging traffic cones under the relentless Seattle drizzle. My buddy at the apartment noticed I was quieter than usual, but I brushed it off as fatigue from the long hours. Truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor. Not in some obsessive way, but more like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Why would someone like her, all business and authority, say something so personal to a guy like me? I figured I'd never see her again, that she was just passing through the site like any other supervisor. Then came that rainy afternoon. The crew had broken for lunch, and most of the guys piled into trucks to hit the nearest drive-thru. I didn't feel like joining, so I grabbed my thermos and a half-stale sandwich from my cooler, finding a spot under a scraggly tree near the edge of the site. The rain was light but steady, pattering on the leaves above me, turning the ground into a muddy slurry. I sat on an overturned bucket staring at the half-finished road, wondering if this was all my life would amount to, endless patches on someone else's path. Footsteps squelched through the mud, and I looked up. There she was, Eleanor, umbrella in one hand, a paper bag in the other. She wasn't in her windbreaker this time, just a practical rain jacket over her work clothes, her ponytail damp at the ends. She stopped a few feet away, tilting her head slightly as if deciding whether to approach. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice cutting through the rain like it had that first day. I shrugged, surprised but trying not to show it. "Sure, but it's not exactly five-star seating out here." She folded her umbrella and sat on a nearby stump, ignoring the wet. Without a word, she reached into the bag and pulled out a wrapped sandwich and a steaming cup of coffee, holding them out to me. "Here, no one should eat lunch in the rain, especially not the guy carrying half the project on his back." I stared at the offering, my own soggy sandwich suddenly looking pathetic. "You didn't have to do that," I said, but I took it anyway, the warmth of the cup seeping through my gloves. The sandwich was from a deli downtown. Roast beef, fresh bread, nothing like the PB&J I'd packed. We sat there for a minute, the rain drumming a steady rhythm, neither of us speaking. It wasn't awkward, though. It felt like the kind of quiet you share with someone who doesn't need filler words. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice lower than before, almost like she was talking to herself. "You know, I've been in this industry for 20 years. Started as an assistant engineer, clawed my way up. My ex-husband was in it too. Thought we'd build something together. But when I got promoted ahead of him, he couldn't handle it. Left me with a stack of papers and a house that felt too big." I listened, chewing slowly, not sure what to say. She wasn't looking at me, her eyes fixed on the road where puddles were forming. They call me names behind my back, you know. The Iron Lady, or worse. Like being good at my job makes me less of a woman. I haven't had anyone ask if I'm okay in years. It's always about the deadlines, the budgets, the delays. Her words hung there, raw and unexpected. I set the coffee down, wiping my mouth with my sleeve. "Sounds tough," I said, meaning it. "Like you're carrying more than just the project." She turned to me then, her eyes searching mine. There was a vulnerability there I hadn't seen before, hidden under layers of competence. "It is, but what about you? You're young, strong. Why stick with this grunt work?" I shrugged again. "It's steady. Pays the bills. I dropped out of community college after a year, figured I was better with my hands than books. No family pushing me, just me trying to get by." We talked a bit more, about the rain that never seemed to stop in Seattle, about how the crew cut corners sometimes, about nothing and everything. The sandwich was gone before I knew it, and the coffee warmed me from the inside out. As lunch wound down, she stood, brushing off her jacket. "Thanks for the company," she said. "It's been a while since I just sat." I nodded, standing too. "Anytime." She started to walk away, then paused, turning back. "You asked if I'm tired that first day? Well, yeah, I am. Exhausted, actually." Before I could respond, she was gone, her boots splashing through the puddles toward her SUV. I watched her drive off, the rain picking up now, blurring the taillights. That simple act, bringing me lunch, felt like more than kindness. It was like she'd seen me, really seen me, in a way no one had before. And in that moment, under the dripping tree, I realized I'd asked her something no one else had. If she was tired. Her silence at first, then that quiet admission, it cracked something open. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I could be more than just the guy with the shovel. Maybe I could be the one who listened. The crew started filtering back, shouting about the weather, but I stayed there a second longer, the empty coffee cup still warm in my hand. She'd given me more than lunch. She'd given me a glimpse into her world. And damn if I didn't want to see more. The days after that rainy lunch blurred into a routine of mud and machinery, but Eleanor stayed in my thoughts like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Work picked up as the project pushed towards some invisible deadline, with the crew scrambling to lay more asphalt before the next storm hit. I found myself glancing at the site office more often, half hoping to spot her SUV pulling in, but she kept her distance. Professional, focused, like that moment under the tree had been a glitch. My buddy at the apartment teased me about being distracted, but I waved it off. How do you explain to someone that a simple question like, "Are you tired?" had cracked open something you didn't even know was closed? Then came the news. I was being reassigned. The foreman slapped me on the back one afternoon, saying they needed extra hands on a different stretch of road a few miles east, near the industrial parks. It was just temporary, he said, but it felt like a door slamming shut. I nodded, packed my tools, and tried not to think about how it meant no more accidental run-ins with her. That evening, as I cleaned out my locker, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Site office, 7 p.m. Need to review some reports. EV. My heart skipped. I knew it was her, but why now? I showed up right on time, the site mostly empty except for a few floodlights buzzing overhead. The office was a portable trailer, steps creaking under my boots as I climbed them. Inside, it was warmer than the chill outside, lit by a single desk lamp that cast long shadows across stacks of blueprints and coffee-stained folders. Eleanor was there, leaning over a table, her ponytail undone now, hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked up when I entered, her expression unreadable, part relief, part something guarded. "Close the door," she said, straightening up. I did, the click echoing in the small space. She motioned to a chair across from her. "Sit, this won't take long." I sat, hands in my lap, feeling out of place in my dusty work clothes against her crisp button-down. "You said reports?" I asked, though I knew it was a cover. The air felt thick, charged, like the moment before a downpour. She nodded but didn't pull out any papers. Instead, she paced a little, arms crossed before stopping in front of me. "Ben, you're being moved tomorrow, I heard." "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just how it goes." She looked at me, then really looked, her eyes searching mine like she was weighing something heavy. "You know, I've built walls around myself for years. After my marriage ended, I swore I wouldn't let anyone in again. Not like that. Work became everything, deadlines, inspections, proving I could handle it all alone." I stayed quiet, sensing she needed to say this. She leaned against the desk, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of her shampoo mixed with the rain outside. "You're 23, I'm 42. That's a gap most people would call a canyon. Do you have any idea what they'd say? What they'd think?" Her words hit like a punch, but not because they were new. I thought them myself. "I do," I admitted, meeting her gaze. "They'd say I'm too young, that you're using me or I'm chasing something foolish. But that's them, not us." She shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "It's not just talk. It's real. I've seen it. Colleagues whispering, friends judging, and you deserve someone without all this baggage." I stood then, closing the small distance between us, though I didn't touch her. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't walk away without saying it. "Eleanor, if I leave tomorrow without telling you this, I'll regret it every day. I like you. Not the kind of like that fades after a few lunches. The kind where I think about you when I'm alone, where I want to be there for the days you're tired, even if it means crossing that canyon." The words hung there, raw and unfiltered. She froze, her breath catching, one hand gripping the edge of the desk like it was the only thing keeping her steady. For a second, I thought she might lean in, might say something that matched what I felt. But then she stepped back, putting space between us again. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. "Ben, don't, please. You're good, too good for this. Let me be the memory of that woman who brought you coffee once. Don't make me the one who disappoints you." I felt a knot in my chest, tight and aching. "You wouldn't disappoint me," I said softly. "But if that's what you want—" She nodded, turning away, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's what has to be. Go." Before I changed my mind. I lingered for a moment, the air heavy with what wasn't said, then turned and left, the door clicking shut behind me. Outside, the rain had started again, soaking through my jacket as I walked to my truck. I sat in the cab for a while, engine off, replaying it all. She hadn't said she didn't feel the same, hell, her eyes had said otherwise. But she was scared, pushing me away because that's what she knew how to do. I started the engine, headlights cutting through the downpour, knowing tomorrow I'd be on a new site miles away. But deep down, I couldn't let go. Not yet. A week had slipped by since that night in the office, each day heavier than the last. The reassignment hit harder than I expected. New site, new crew, same grind but without the familiar faces or the quiet hope of spotting her. I threw myself into the work, digging trenches for utility lines under the overcast Seattle sky, my mind replaying her words on loop. Don't make me the one who disappoints you. It stung, but I respected it. She'd built her life around control, and I was a wild card, too young, too rough around the edges. I told myself to move on, focus on the job, maybe hit up some old friends for a beer after shifts. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that easy. Every time I wiped sweat from my brow, I wondered if she was thinking about me too. Then the accident happened. It was mid-morning, the ground slick from overnight rain, and we were excavating a section near an old drainage culvert. The foreman had warned us about unstable soil, but deadlines push people to cut corners. I was down in the trench, knee-deep in mud, when the wall gave way, a low rumble, then a cascade of dirt and rocks tumbling in. I shouted, scrambling back, but my boot caught on a rebar stake. Pain shot through my arm as I fell, the weight pinning me for a second before the guys hauled me out. It wasn't bad. A sprained wrist, some bruises, a shallow cut on my forearm that needed stitches, but it shook me. The ambulance ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and paramedics asking questions I barely answered. They patched me up in the ER, bandaged my arm, and moved me to a quiet room for observation just in case. I lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. My phone was dead, buried somewhere in my mud-caked jacket, so I couldn't call anyone. The nurse checked in once, offering pain meds I waved off. "You got family coming?" she asked. I shook my head. "Nah, it's just me." She nodded sympathetically and left, the door clicking shut. Alone with my thoughts, the ache in my arm paled compared to the one in my chest. I wondered if Eleanor even knew, or if she'd already filed me away as a fleeting distraction. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, stopping outside my door. I heard muffled voices, a nurse, then a woman's. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Eleanor stood in the threshold, her coat dripping from the rain outside, her face pale under the harsh lights. She looked smaller somehow, less like the unbreakable supervisor, and more like someone who'd been carrying too much for too long. Our eyes met, and for a second, neither of us moved. "Ben," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The nurse hovered for a moment, then left us alone. "How'd you know?" I asked, propping myself up on my good elbow, wincing at the pull in my side. She set her bag down, avoiding my gaze at first. "Word travels fast on these sites. Foreman called the office about the collapse. I came as soon as I heard." I nodded, not sure what to say. She pulled a chair closer but didn't sit right away, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her coat. "They said you're okay, just bruises?" "Yeah," I replied, holding up my bandaged arm. "Nothing broken. Lucky, I guess." She finally sat, her eyes scanning me like she was checking for hidden damage. "Lucky. God, Ben, you could have been buried down there." The concern in her voice hit me harder than the fall. I'd never seen her like this, unguarded, almost fragile. "I'm fine," I said softly. "Really, you didn't have to come." She looked down at her hands, twisting a ring on her finger, a habit I hadn't noticed before. That's what I told myself on the drive over, that it wasn't my place, but I couldn't stay away. She paused, her breath shaky. "When I heard, all I could think was that I pushed you out of my life, and now this." I reached out with my good hand, but she beat me to it, her fingers brushing mine tentatively at first, then holding on. The touch was electric, warm against the sterile cold of the room. "Eleanor." She squeezed my hand, her eyes meeting mine now, glistening but steady. "I stood outside that door for 5 minutes, watching you through the glass. The nurse asked if I was family. I said no, but that I was the one who sent you away when all you wanted was to stay." Her words hung there, raw and honest, echoing the regret I'd felt since that night. I didn't pull away. You were scared, I said. I get it. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek that she quickly wiped away. I was. I am. But seeing you here, it made me realize I don't want to be the one who hurts the person I least want to hurt. My heart pounded, the monitors beeping a little faster. What are you saying? She held my gaze, her grip tightening. If you still want this, if you still want me, I'm done running. The room felt smaller, the world outside fading to nothing. I squeezed her hand back, the pain in my arm forgotten. I do. I haven't stopped. She leaned in then, her forehead resting gently against mine, her breath warm on my skin. We stayed like that for a long moment, the rain tapping against the window like applause. For the first time, I felt like maybe we could bridge that gap, not despite everything, but because of it. She'd come, not out of duty, but because she couldn't stay away. And in that hospital room, with my arm bandaged and her hand in mine, I knew we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. 1 year had passed since that hospital room, and life had settled into a rhythm I never imagined for myself. The accident turned out to be a turning point, not just for my arm, which healed fine after a few weeks of light duty, but for us. Eleanor didn't vanish after that visit. Instead, she showed up. Quietly at first, with text checking in, then lunches away from the site, and eventually evenings where we'd talk until the streetlights flickered on. I quit the road crew not long after, using the downtime to study for a certification in urban infrastructure tech. Passed it on my first try, landing a steadier gig inspecting pipelines for a local firm. Eleanor shifted too, left the high-pressure supervising role for independent consulting, picking projects that didn't chain her to a desk or a site 24/7. We didn't rush anything. No big declarations or labels at first. But one weekend, driving out to Spokane for a site she was advising on, we passed a quiet neighborhood on a hillside, houses with views of the valley below. What if we tried something new? She said, glancing at me from the passenger seat. A month later, we rented a small place there, a cozy one-story with a sloped yard and a fence that needed mending. It wasn't fancy, just enough space for two people figuring things out. The road we'd worked on was visible from the back porch on clear days, a reminder of where it all started. Mornings were simple now. Coffee on the counter, her reading reports while I sketched out work plans. Evenings, we'd walk the block, her hand slipping into mine when no one was around. The age gap came up sometimes, not in arguments, but in quiet moments. People stare, she'd say once, after a dinner out where the waiter assumed I was her son. I'd shrug. Let them, we know what this is. She'd smile then, that real one that lit up her eyes and pull me closer. One crisp fall evening, we were out front painting the old wooden fence that ran along the property line. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the grass, the air smelling of fresh paint and turning leaves. I'd taken the day off to help, and we worked side by side, brushes dipping into the can, strokes smoothing over the weathered slats. Eleanor paused midway through a section, setting her brush down and wiping her hands on an old rag. She looked at me, her hair tied back but a few strands loose, paint flecked on her cheek like accidental freckles. Ben? She said softly, her voice carrying that thoughtful tone I'd come to love. If one day I'm not as strong as you think, if I get weaker, slower, if the years catch up, what then? Would you still stay? I stopped painting, leaning the brush against the can. Her question wasn't new. It echoed the fears she'd carried since the beginning, the ones that had made her push me away before. I set my rag down and stepped closer, taking her hands in mine. They were warm, steady, but I felt the slight tremor, the vulnerability she rarely showed. Eleanor, I said, looking her in the eyes, you're the one who taught me that strength isn't about being unbreakable. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. If that day comes, I'll be here, not because I have to, but because I want to. She searched my face, then nodded slowly. You make it sound so simple. It is, I replied. Remember that road we fixed? It wasn't perfect. Cracks everywhere, uneven patches. But it held because we kept at it. Love's like that. It doesn't need to be flat or flawless. It just needs two people willing to walk it together, long enough to make it their own. Her eyes softened, and she leaned in, resting her head against my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling the steady rise and fall of her breath. For the first time, her smile came without reservation. No holding back, no shadows of doubt. We stood there as the light faded, the fence half painted, the world quiet around us. We never had a wedding, no rings or announcements, no gathering of friends to explain what they might not understand. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. Our life was ours. Quiet dinners where she'd vent about a stubborn client and I'd share stories from inspections, lazy Sundays on the porch with books and silence, trips to the hardware store for fence paint or light bulbs. The gap between us, 19 years, faded into the background, just another detail like the sloped yard or the creaky front door. Looking back, it all started with a misplaced layer of asphalt and a sentence she hadn't meant to say aloud. I was just a kid with a shovel, invisible to most, but I saw her, the real her, tired and strong all at once. And she saw me, not as some young laborer, but as someone worth letting in. Love doesn't need a blueprint or a perfect path. It just needs courage to see the beauty in the cracks, and two people ready to fill them together. That's what we found, and it's enough.